All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Bill of Materials webinar, Back to the Basics. My name is Stephanie Pepper, and today we're just going to be going over some general overview of the Bill of Materials, some tips and tricks, and some best practices. Also, I'm going to end with some margin erosion preview, and then there will be an additional webinar on that. So just to get started, some basic reminders of just kind of what the Bill of Materials all entails. Most of you already have some experience here, but this is also going to be great videos for some new users, new training and things like that. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics here. So obviously we're in the Bill of Materials module. Okay. So if you don't know how to get there, modules, Bill of Materials within your project. So you can't start a Bill of Materials without doing those first few steps that we already did in the first couple of webinars. Okay. From there, in the Bill of Materials, right when you open it up, it's always going to be a big blank screen. If you just joined us, if you'll just mute yourself. All right, thank you. So it's going to be a big blank screen, and you kind of have to build it and get it started. Okay, so there are technically there's multiple ways to add parts to a bill of materials. I'm going to go over the three most frequent ways of adding parts today, which is importing into the bill of materials from an external source, a CIF file or an XML file, the search tool, just adding something manually from a search tool, and the project spec tool. So those are the three most frequent ways to add parts. But to get it started, you either have to import, or you can always go Tools, New Option to manually start building that quote out. Okay. So when you select Tools, New Option, it's always going to the first one that you do is always going to build out what we call the tree here at eManage. So it's 3 levels. You can't have anything without having all 3 levels. Okay. Now you can have multiple of each one of these. You can have multiple options, multiple phases, multiple BOMs, but you have to have at least one of each to get something started. So we call this the tree. Okay. As you can see, the very top level, and it's kind of, you see this diagonal here, so those are your different levels. If you just came in, if you'll just mute yourself, please. That top level is your option level. Okay, that's the main level. This is what I would call your quote level. This is what builds out the whole thing. So options can truly mean multiple options. I can have, option number 1, maybe it's a more price point option, and option number 2, maybe it's, some more expensive finishes and things like that. But option really truly means quote. So keep in mind, each time that you create a new option, and so if I just went Tools, New Option again, each time that I create a new option, it's going to give me its own unique identifier, quote number. Okay, so each option equals quote number. Now you can combine multiple options on one quote, which we'll get into here shortly, but just keep in mind each time that you do that, it's going to be a new quote number. Okay, phases, that second level, so you see option name, new option, phase name, default phase. So when I talk about highlighting your phase or highlighting your BOM, I'm always talking about on this level here, on the row header. This is my phase level. Phases can truly mean phases. You're installing in phases. Okay, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But phases more times than other means more of your organization, your tagging, your areas, your sections. So this could be, you could have one phase for conference room and a BOM that has all the pieces that make up this conference room. Then you can have another phase that says president's office. Underneath that, you're going to have a BOM that holds all the different parts and pieces for the president's office. Okay. So with that being said, you can see without, going too much further, the phase has a BOM underneath. That's where parts are contained. Okay. So you cannot add parts and pieces to the phase level. As you can see, when I highlight the BOM level, okay, my search for toolbar comes up. My project spec button comes up. So those are those 2 other ways that you can add parts to the bill of materials on top of importing. Okay, so you cannot add parts to anything but the BOM level. Have to be highlighted on it. Be careful highlighting in the wrong places. If I just click right here, you can see it didn't do anything on my search toolbar here. You have to be highlighted. And that's why it's so important throughout the system. Anytime you're highlighting, you should always be highlighting on the row header. It'll keep you from making mistakes in fields that are editable, but also, obviously, it's going to get you to where you need to get to quicker without having to make 2 clicks. Okay. So this tree here, you'll get more used to it as you actually start to build real, bill of materials. We're just doing some testing here and showing you some examples, but as you get a little bit more familiar with it, it gets a little less busy to the eyes. I know right off the bat, it seems like, wow, that's a lot of information up top, and I haven't even added any parts yet. But once you get a little bit used to it, it doesn't look so busy. These numbers are here for a reason. Quickly, if you just came in, if you could just mute yourself. Quickly, you can see at the top level, my option level, this is all my option pricing. So the entire quote, the entire bill of materials. Okay. The phase level, so if I had multiple phases, now I can see per phase some of my different pricing on my different phase levels. I got someone beeping. If you'll just mute yourself. I got you. I muted you, whoever you are, 248. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start adding some parts and pieces so you can kind of see how this starts to build up. So I'm going to start with those first 2 ways of adding parts, okay? The search for tool and the project spec tool if you do have project spec. So again, I'm highlighted on my BOM level. Now down here in the search for, I can just start typing my part number. So if I just started typing labor, my different labor parts are going to come up down here. So this is one way to do it. I have some older clients who might be using the right-click add from search. This search for toolbar is a lot faster to get to, less clicks. So definitely use this. And the way that it works is you just start typing the part number. You highlight the part that you want to add. So let's say I wanted to add this labor installation line, customer price of $30 underneath my company. I would just highlight the line and hit plus on the add quantity. You can adjust this quantity at this time. I find myself more likely to just leave it at 1. That way, if I have to add another part and it's 3 and then the next one's 4, I'm not having to flip it a bunch. I just prefer to flip it in the bottom after I add it, but totally a preference for you guys. So you can change that quantity if you need to. Otherwise, you just hit the plus sign to add that part into the bill of materials. And that whole search toolbar is going to go away automatically. And then you can see your labor line at the bottom. So you can see some numbers are starting to punch in. It's one way of adding, and all these parts, if you're not familiar with this, as you start importing CIF files or XML files into your bill of materials, you're building yourself up like a parts library or a parts catalog. So every time that you import something in, you're just building that library. So technically, after the first initial time that it's imported in, I can always come down here and just start typing a real part number. Now, it has to be imported in once before I can do that, though. Otherwise, this search for is used a lot for labor, design, project management. So if I just start typing those names, they're going to start coming up down here. Any of those miscellaneous parts, if best practice, if you have to put any miscellaneous parts into your master parts listing, make sure you're putting the part number with a dash and the actual manufacturer name. That way it makes it a little bit easier to go search for it. So instead of, I don't have Technion, but if I was doing a miscellaneous part for Boss Design, instead of typing MISC, I would just type the manufacturer name and go straight to that instead of looking through all those miscellaneous parts. You guys will get more familiar with what's in your parts catalog as you use the software. If you've already been using it, you're probably pretty familiar with it. But you can add whatever parts you need to into your master parts listing, as long as you have the rights to do so. Okay. The other most popular way to add parts in is this project spec tool. If you don't have this, you're about to find out why you should. Project spec, all we did was integrate. Basically, all we're doing is connecting eManage to project spec's catalog, and it works the exact same way it does inside the regular project spec software. So from here, I can just go double click on 9 to 5, double click, find my chair. So it's just a catalog that you click through and choose all of your options. Okay. You can skip options. Okay, unselect, and it shows up in red on the quote. So it's very much in the customer's face if they have not selected those options. Otherwise, you can just double click, select those options out. Another cool reason why you should have that project spec, and it's great for, it's not meant for those big projects. It's meant for the onesie twosies, a salesperson to be able to come in here without having to go through design and just pick one chair. That's what it's ideal for, get through those little onesie twosies. But also, it becomes really helpful when the client does end up selecting their finishes. All I do is, if I have that catalog installed, I can double click on that line, and it's just going to open me right back up to the catalog, right where the options are not selected, and I can finish optioning it out. Just double clicking through and hitting accept. That's also, going to pull in the most accurate pricing as long as your catalogs are all updated. It's pulling in the true list pricing from the manufacturer's catalog. So help, with that margin erosion. Also, if you have, your manufacturer discount set up, it's automatically going to discount it for you and everything. If anyone's interested in reaching out to Project Spec, we do have a Project Spec contact that you can reach out to give you all the information, who's semi-familiar with how eManage and Project Spec work together. So definitely reach out to me and I can get that to you. So the third way to import or to add parts into a bill of materials is the import. So you can see, I'm going to minimize, best practice here, minimize what you're not working in. Okay, if I'm not doing anything else in this option, I'm just going to minimize it and move on to what I am working with. That'll keep you from making mistakes in the wrong thing. But right next to the tools, before I was doing tools, new option, right next to that you have the import button. So from here, you can select what you're importing. Okay, I'm just going to do a standard CIF. Something to take note of, if you're not familiar, you guys are in control of what the settings are when you import. Typically we set you up at the beginning with your import settings, ask you how you're doing your tagging and things like that. But you do have one-time settings that you can adjust if you need to per import. But I highly suggest, making a default for your entire company if you don't already have one. If you click edit, that's going to edit it for everyone. So the one time is just for that one initial import that you're doing right there. But the edit button will take you to your import settings. If you needed to adjust, what tag it's reading, what specifier you're using, things like that, these are your options here. If anyone needs any help with setting these up, if you don't feel like it's pulling in your correct tags and things like that, just reach out to support, or you can reach out to me and we'll get you set up there. You should already have that CIF or that XML file saved into your documents. You shouldn't have to go browse, double click through your shared file. Okay, you should just be able to hit this drop down. Ideally, you already have it in here, and it recognizes what you're trying to import based off of your import type. Okay. So that's that CIF file there, and I just hit import CIF XML. Those top options, these import into existing option, import into existing phase, choose Autopart templates, these are all options, okay? If you're just doing a first initial import, there's nothing else that you have to do down here other than hit import, okay? Unless you're coming back and adding something to an existing option or phase, that's when you would use these drop downs. So I'm starting one fresh. I'm just going to add a new option so you can get an idea of what multiple options look like inside of a bill of materials. When you import, if you do get a pop-up at the bottom and it shows some lines, that means that it didn't recognize some of the parts that you've imported in, which means either you don't have it set up, like you don't have the vendor ref code or the MFG code set up behind the scenes, and you really want to set those up, so that you're not having to do it every single time that you import in. Okay, so if you're seeing something at the bottom of the screen every single time you import, please reach out to us and let us know, so that way we can point you in the right direction of what you should be doing. That way you're not having to do that setup stuff every single time. If you are, needing to tell it where to go, all it's doing is saying, hey, I have a part that I don't recognize what vendor to go to, what product type, what parts category. I don't know where it's supposed to go. So you have to set those up and tell it where to go. And all of those are so important. You know, what vendor it goes to is telling it how to cut the PO. Product type tells it what QuickBooks accounts to hit. Parts category tells it if it's taxable or non-taxable. So 3 really important setup, you know, features that need to be taken care of. So as you can see, when I import it in, it automatically puts my different, I tagged my product inside the CIF file, and it automatically brought that in on my phase name. So if you're tagging inside your CIF file and it's not bringing it in automatically and you're having to move things around and organize it after the initial import, again, just reach out to us so we can get you set up correctly. Should not have to be doing that if you're using tagging. So that's a best practice. Definitely tag inside your CIF files. One less thing that I have to do once I get into eManage. The more that you do in your CIF file, the less that I have to do in eManage. I mean, either way you have to do it, but I prefer to just knock all that out in my CIF file, and that way I'm just ready to go, print the quote, and move on. You guys can see that I automatically put a sort number in here. So this is a little trick that I'll talk to you guys about a little bit later. You know, if you're sorting things manually in eManage, again, one less thing that I have to do. I'll talk to you about how I did that, but I just want you to take note of that. So you can see it's putting in my list. I don't have any manufacturer discounts set up on these manufacturers in my test database. So you can see it's just putting the cost in the cell at the same. But I didn't want to set those up because I want to show you guys how to do some bulk pricing. So that's kind of just a quick rundown of how to put parts into the system. I'm going to go ahead and move forward and talk about some best practices here. So you can see I have 2 options in here. I want you to see how it's going to look whenever I get to the quoting screen. But my very first thing that I always do before I get ready, you know, let's say all my pricing's done, I've checked, done my margin, done all my discounting, everything looks good. One of the first things I do is I rename my option, okay? So this is actually your quote name. So if you name it here, okay, you're gonna see when I flip over to the quote, view quotes tab, it automatically names my quote for me. So again, just one less thing that I have to do. If I name it here, organize it here where it's very clear what option is what, you know, this really comes into play, you know, especially later on down the road. If let's say I'm having to order some additional parts, there's a punch on it, you know, I'm gonna put punch here and, you know, maybe missing top cap or whatever additional pieces that I would have to order. You know, make it very clear what this option entails. That way, you know, when I'm looking at it later, other people are looking at it, it's very clear what option is what. Okay, then, you know, the second best practice obviously would be to name your phases. Organizing them. So when I click on this, all the parts down below are what is contained on this phase. So if I had 5 different parts that, you know, were supposed to go to floor 12 Bob G, they would all show up down here when I'm highlighting on the phase up here. So up top, think of this as your organization and previews, you know, of your different pricing and margins and things like that. Down below is what's going to hold your actual parts and pieces. Okay. So when I flip over to view quotes tab up top, right next to view BOM, we should see 2 options here. Okay, so you can see second option here, I named my option that. The other quote, I named my quote that. So it automatically carried over. Just one less thing that I have to do. So from here, always, 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 you should be double clicking and setting this quote up on the initial view print of this quote. You know, after you have all your settings done, you can highlight and just hit print quote. But you should be double clicking to make sure everything looks good before going and viewing it. So this is your create edit customer quote screen. This is where you should be double checking everything. You know, if I started my project from the correct install location and I had already set up a default build to for 5909 Camp Bowie Boulevard, it's automatically pulling all that in because of how we set it up. You know, if anything needs to be changed at this point, absolutely you can change it. Search, grab it, drag and drop. Okay. but you should at least be double checking these things to make sure they look good. When you view the quote, you're going to give it a double check there as well. But if you check it here and then move on to your quote, it's less back and forth that you have to do. So my eyes initially get drawn up to the top left corner. And so I'm just going through and I'm double checking these tabs here. If it's drop shipping to the client, it's drop shipping to Bank of Texas 5909. I can go up down here, search Bank of Texas, grab the 5909, drag and drop. Okay. If you're shipping to, your warehouse or a location that you're using all the time, a contractor's warehouse that you're frequently using, you can add them into this little truck symbol. Okay, you can see here, I've got one in there, but you should see your warehouse in here, or like I said, the frequently used ship to addresses. If you want to know more about how to get things into this little truck, this little global ship to address, definitely reach out to me, okay? Little shortcuts. Should definitely be filling in that ship to at this point. If you do it now, by the time that it gets to order entry, and you'll see on the next webinar when we hit the little save button in order entry, it's automatically pulling everything from your quote. So again, one less thing that someone else has to worry about, and you're covering your own, okay? Making sure you're for sure setting this. If it's drop ship, I do not want it to accidentally get shipped to the warehouse, and now I have to get it to the site, and all of that's going to be on us cost-wise. So I'm always covering myself. If it's drop ship, make sure you're filling that in. But even if it's not, I say fill it in. Make a habit of it. The less times that you're going to forget about it if you just make a habit of it. Double check your install. I highly suggest, if you don't already have defaults set for your company, to set a template up. And so what I mean by that is, if you want all your quotes to kind of be showing the same, maybe I like a very clean start. These three are what I typically check off, and what I typically say gives you a nice clean quote. You don't want it to be too busy. If some of these things, your customer might ask you to put on there, or you might have them on for some clients and not others, you can set these templates up, and what it'll do is automatically check what I'm telling it to check, and it'll automatically fill in some of these other things for me. So if I tell it to always do option phase as the summary type, and to always put my terms and conditions on every single quote, to always have these three checked, I'm going to set it up as a default, and it'll just always, every single time, every new quote that I do, it's going to automatically put these options on there. Highly suggest doing that. If you need some more assistance here, definitely let me know. So then after I'm double checking some of this other stuff, I'm going up here and I'm just fixing my other little options here. So your quote name should have automatically tied in right there. So typically what we do is just copy this and paste it into your cover page title. Okay, don't leave your cover page title blank, or, I guess you could, but typically it's just a copy paste. That doesn't take very long. We are looking into how to possibly have these just repeat automatically. All the little things that we can do to kind of save you guys a little bit of time. We're definitely going in that direction. Prepared for, that was my customer name, my primary contact on my project information page. So you can see here, top right corner, Tess Jones was my primary contact. So that's why that first contact you add into the project information, that carries over to my prepared for. One less thing you have to do there. Salesperson should automatically fill in. Summary type, I always go with option phase. I don't know any other clients that are going with any other options here, but you can break it down by manufacturer or product type. Typically, the client wants to see if you are showing the summary page, which you can turn off. You can turn the cover page off, but if you are turning the summary off and the cover page, you do have to do the summary first, then the cover page. Okay. When I am showing the summary page, I usually show option/phase. It's going to give the best breakdown. That means that it's going to give them the breakdown of what we put in those tags. So that floor 1, floor 2, what I had in my BOM, it's just going to break it down for them on the summary page of what each phase costs them. So it's a nice little summary. Your terms and conditions, if you don't have terms and conditions, I definitely have some samples you can take a look at. I highly suggest putting some terms and conditions in place, having them print on every single quote. That'll print on your last page before the deposit invoice if you are printing a deposit invoice. Terms of sale should also automatically fill in based off of what you had in your project information. I'm sorry, yeah, in the customer file. Okay. If you do want to show a deposit invoice, I'm going to suggest to do the same as your summary type. So deposit type should be option/phase. That's the standard best practice there. What that means for you guys, if you're not using your deposit invoice, way back when I used to do some accounting, we would just create, like a dummy, what I would call like a dummy invoice. We'd put it in QuickBooks just to present to the client for them to have something for their accounting department to give you a deposit, to cut a check. They have to have something on paper. So what we've done in eManage is put that inside of the quoting screen. So that means that your salespeople technically are capable of submitting deposit invoices. They don't hit the books. They're just pro forma invoices. They're just to get a check cut. Okay, so you can print it alone by itself, or you can print it with the whole entire quote. Typically, you're presenting the quote without, asking for money first. So you're not going to have anything on that initial sending of the quote. And then when you get the approval back, you could come back in here, double click, print just on its own and submit that to their accounting department. You have a deposit note area, sign off note area. Down at the bottom right, a lot of people forget about this. Available options, check to include in quotes. You can see I have quote name. So this is my one of my options, and this is another option. So that means that I can put multiple options on one quote. So if I want to combine those, I can. You also have some different options, quote header, quote footer. These are quote footer. These are all HTML editing like windows. So you can make things bold, red, in their faces. So on things that you need to make little notes of that they need to sign off by, you can use these quote headers, quote footers. Otherwise, save and print. If you have alternatives, you'll have an alternative box pop up. Otherwise, I'm in my test database, so it's going to act a little funky on me, of course. But you guys have seen the quotes, but I'm gonna keep moving because I know most of you are probably here for the tips and tricks and the best practices. If anybody has any trouble printing quotes or wants to review how the quotes look, please reach out to me. But they are very, very nice quotes. You get the summary page, your quote body, your terms and conditions, and the deposit invoice at the end. Okay. Let's move on to the fun stuff. All right, so my first tip and trick, I was talking to you guys about the sorting, the automatic sorting here. So I'm going to just open up my CIF file here from my documents. I'm not opening for editing. I just want to show you what I did here. If you're, no matter what program you're in, you should have some tagging area, whether it's CET or Project Spec or 2020. However you're doing your tagging, I highly suggest all your designers are putting your tagging in the same place. That directly affects everyone when they're importing in. So definitely use the same area to do the consistent tagging. But you can see here what I did. The trick is to put the number, a closed parentheses, and a space. Very important that you do exactly that way. So you do have to use 2 digits. So I like to start with 10 typically, 10, 15, 20, 25. Gives me a little wiggle room after I import. If I need to add something in a little bit later and put something in between those phases, has a little wiggle room there. But the trick is, again, 2 digits. So it could be 01, 02, doesn't matter. But the closed parentheses space and then the actual tag afterwards, that's going to automatically feed into my priority. I'm sorry, the sort column. So you can see if I didn't do it that way, it's just going to automatically come in, I believe, based off of how I've entered it into Project Spec. So I love that little trick. Otherwise, you can come in here and you can sort manually, okay? But do use 2 digits. If you tried to do 1 and then you had a 10 as well, 10 would try to follow after 1. So at the very least, use 2 digits. I don't really care how you are, what digits you're using, just use 2 digits there. Okay, a couple of other little tricks. Copy pasting functionalities. You can copy entire phases. You can copy entire options by right-clicking, highlighting first, highlight first, then right-click, copy, and I can right-click, paste, and it'll just paste the entire option. You can do that in other projects as well. So if they're doing the same exact thing 6 months later, I can open up that project and either duplicate it from actions, duplicate this project and duplicate the BOM, or right-click copy and right-click paste into your new project. So there's the entire options, but you can also do phases, and you can also do individual parts. You just have to know where to place them. So you know that parts belong to BOMs now, phases belong to options, and options are the main top level. So options have to be pasted in this blank space up here. Phases have to be pasted to options, and parts have to be pasted to the final level, the BOM. Okay, so if you're copying this entire line, you want to paste it into the correct BOM. We also have a Clipboard Manager. That's a fairly new feature. If you'll just mute yourself, and we'll definitely get to some questions at the end there. Okay, so here I can right-click on, let's say that this chair is a standard chair that I have a client that's just always ordering the same thing over and over and over again. What I can do is right-click, copy items, and save to Clipboard Manager. And again, you can do this for options, phases, or parts. So you can save all 3 levels to the Clipboard Manager. So if this individual chair is something that I'm using constantly over and over, right-click, copy items, and save to Clipboard Manager. And you can organize them. Maybe it's a particular customer. So I'm going to go with the one that I'm using, Bank of Texas, standard task chair. Okay. You can see these are not, you do not have to put anything in here. You can share it with everyone, or you can just have it for yourself. If I do save, now I can right-click, paste from Clipboard Manager, and there it is. I'd highlight and hit paste. That's the Clipboard Manager there. Also, inside the Clipboard Manager, if you missed this update, we are now delete proof. So if you accidentally deleted something, a whole option, a whole, just a part, individual part, whatever it is that you deleted, if you click, so same concept, right-click, paste from Clipboard Manager, and I go show recently deleted items. Here's everything that I've deleted in the last, I think it holds, someone will have to confirm for me, but I'm pretty sure it holds for the last 7 days. So typically people are using that, oh, I did not mean to delete that, and you just get it back right away. You also have a move to functionality. So these are just a bunch of tips and tricks I want to share with you guys. So let's say I accidentally added this to floor 12 Bob G, and it needed to be on floor 12 Betty, floor 2 Betty. So I highlight the line, move to, quote name here, so I'm doing it to this one, and I'm just expanding out. These are just like what I'm seeing at the top level up here. So it's my option, my phase. And if I expand all the way out, you can see if I tried to put it to the phase, move to selected is grayed out. You have to know that parts belong to BOM level. So if I was moving an entire phase to another option, I would want my phase to be moved to on top of the option. I'd highlight the option. But in this case, I'm moving it to the BOM of this phase. I'm highlighting all the way down at the bottom level and hitting move to selected. Another tip here, you guys probably already know about the recent changes. If you scroll all the way over, it's typically towards the end. After I make an initial change, so let's see. So you can see here, I changed the quantity on one of these. On the entire option, I highlighted the entire option and I scrolled over. you're going to see the last modification, the last change. It'll tell you who changed it, what changed, from what to what, okay? But you also have a total history change. So view change history, that's going to show you everything. It's going to pop up at the bottom. And it does only happen after you make at least 2 changes. So I've only made 1 change to this, so it's going to only show on that line. After I've made more than 1 change, you're going to see all my change history at the bottom here. And you can either click that little arrow or just hit view change history again to hide it. So really nice to kind of see that sometimes. Another tip and trick here to globally change pricing. So you should already know if I need to change an individual line, you know, I can just come down here and in these fields, the each fields, and I can just change it. Okay, so if this is technically needs to be $30 list, okay, I can just change that right there in that field. I can use my tab keys or my arrow keys here to keep scrolling over. You can see it's frozen here and here. I have 2 pins in my particular layout. These layouts can all be changed. We're gonna have a webinar on that, but you know, and it works both ways. So if I want my discount to be, and it does take the backslashes as well. So if I go 50, 20, it's gonna automatically calculate that to a 60 and change my cost. Let's say I get a deeper discount. I find out the cost is supposed to be 15. Okay, or I'm sorry, less discount. You can just change it here and it's gonna automatically change your discount here. So it goes back and forth. You can change it at any level and it'll adjust accordingly. But what I really wanna show you guys is the price by. I typically go with like either my MFG code or maybe product type, but I'd say most frequently used is probably price by MFG code because that's when you're doing kind of that bulk pricing, global pricing. If I needed to change everything that was under the MFG code of 925 and I had 100 different, you know, lines on this particular option, I could just come in here and say, okay, my manufacturer discount should be, you know, 60, 20. It also takes the percentages as well. So if you needed to type in, you know, it should be 50 off, I can type in 50. It will take the backslash as well, but it'll change everything with that MFG code. Same for margin. You know, if I needed to just to quickly adjust my margin, this is just such a great tool to use to globally change a lot of lines if you have a big project going on. But another one, you know, sales tax rate. You guys know we're coming out with the new sales tax rates, but if for some reason you need to globally change everything, you know, right now it's coming up as 7.25 on everything. I can just quickly come in here and say, you know what, it's supposed to be 0 on everything. So you just punch in what it should be, okay? And hit enter or tab or click away, and it's automatically going to change. So I would just have to do a little refresh. And you'll see now it's changing on based off of what I put in this price by. You do have to be highlighted, so make sure you're highlighted on the option that you need to be highlighted on. Also, another little tip and trick, and then we'll move on to some best practices. I want to show you guys some pictures, but I won't be able to show you on the quote, so that kind of stinks. I want you guys to see it, but definitely test it on your own. If you're not using pictures and you kind of want to pretty up your quote and your presentation to the client, we have different levels of pictures. You might have already seen that when I added this piece in from Project Spec, if you do have the Project Spec tool, if Project Spec does have a picture for that particular part, you know, it's automatically going to be added on to the bill of materials if you're doing a line item quote. When you turn these around, I'm just clicking, holding my mouse down and moving it around. If you don't like the angle of it, that is whatever you have it as here is what's going to print on the quote. But also you can right click and you can do display modes, and I'm on rendered. Okay, if right now you might be on like a wireframe, you can change this to rendered and it gives it a really nice image there. And once you change it once, it'll be changed, it'll remember that setting for all other additions from the Project Spec tool. So that's, a BOM picture. If you wanted to pull, that picture from the catalog with the actual fabric and you have a picture for that chair, you can right-click, add modify BOM part picture, and you can override this picture if you need to. So that's a BOM level picture. But you also have phase level pictures and option level pictures. So if you just right-click or double-click, you can right-click or double-click. You can go modify option, description, and picture. I like the option pictures for like floor plans or full like office renderings. Because what it does is it prints a really nice size, pretty large image on the front page of the quote. It's on its own page of the quote. So what I can do is I can go in, find that image. Let's say I wanted to use this. I can just right-click copy. I don't even have to save it anywhere on my computer. And then over here, this little tool, anywhere you see that little guy, that's a paste. I'm just gonna hit paste. And you do have to have an option description in order for it to print on your quote. So here I could just say, conference room with 6 chairs, whatever description you want to put there, and apply text and close. And that prints a really nice size large image. Okay. Same for phase level, it works exactly the same. You can double click on it or right click and modify phase description and picture. Works the same exact way. Phase pictures are a little bit smaller and obviously they're per phase. You can only have one option picture, but if you had multiple, I wanted to show an image for this entire phase, an image for this entire phase, and an image for this entire phase, do multiple on those. If you're doing a phase quote or you're tricking the system to only show, you guys aren't familiar with this little trick here, phase quantity, phase unit of measure. So I can come in here and I could put 1 phase unit of measure of each. And what this little trick does is it lumps everything down below into one line on your quote. So maybe I don't want to show them all the detail. I had like 10 lines down here. And I just want the client to see 1 each at a cell of 565. That's the trick right there. And if you had any pictures like down here, it's not going to show any except for the picture that you have if you have a picture on the phase level. So typically, when I went into view quotes and I double clicked on my quote, typically everybody's leaving them at line item quote and using this little trick here. Okay, line item quote is just a little bit of a better quote. That phase quote hasn't been updated in quite some time. So I really like the line item quote, but if I do want to lump some, of this phase on my quote, I don't want them to see all the detail, this is the best way to do it right here. So I went over the best practice of naming your option. That's your quote name. It carries over. Don't forget about that. Another best practice, make sure that you're cleaning these up. Okay, let's say that they went with this, I presented 3 different options to the client, but they went with this one. Okay, it's very important that you're cleaning them up. And what you're gonna do is just check on not current. And when you hit tab or enter on your keyboard, or you just click away somewhere, it marks a line through it. You want to kind of keep that. I highly encourage you to keep the history. You can right click, delete the entire thing, but by marking through it, let's say that they come back in a month and like, you know what, we only got the budget approved for the original option that you quoted me. Can we go back to that one? Very quickly, I can just come in here, uncheck it, bring it back, and mark through both of these. So keep those updated, just like your documents, which we'll go over when we get to document management. Also, under view quotes, best practice here. And you can see as I marked through them as not current, they disappeared here under view quotes. So you're cleaning it up there. Okay. Now, some of you probably already know that if you uncheck most likely, if you uncheck most likely, it's still showing up in some reporting. We're actually putting out a fix in this next update that you guys heard about our update coming out. That should be out in the next couple of weeks. We're hoping for this week, but we got this last fix in there. We're going to go ahead and update everyone's database. If there's something unchecked as valid and checked on as most likely, what we're what we're going to do is just clean those up, and everything's going to be unchecked as most likely if it's not valid. So it should, that's the way that it should work, and it's going to work like that here very soon. So just keep an eye on these. If you have it checked as unchecked as most likely and one checked as valid, what that's doing is it's totaling up all your valid and most likely quotes for an approximate amount in some of the reporting, your approximate value. So you want to make sure that you're definitely checking the ones that are going to be most likely chosen and unchecking the ones that are no longer valid. Okay, now from here, if I uncheck these, that's going to automatically do both for you in the next update. So if these are not current, it's going to automatically uncheck valid and most likely for you. So you just kind of want to clean those things up, keep an eye on those. Talk to you guys about the quote templates. Oh, last but not least, for best practice, saving to eManage 1, highly important. When I'm in that view screen, you guys know about the Save to eManage 1 button in the top left corner. Fortunately, I can't get to that screen right now, or maybe I can. Let's try this real quick. Just going to use a custom real quick. Nope. So the Save to eManage 1 button, highly encourage you guys to be saving that history. Okay. Now, if I saved it and I come back and I make a change and I saved a new one, that's when we're going to get into document management. You want to make sure you're going into your documents and unchecking the one that's no longer valid. Okay, we'll get into that in more depth in document training, but definitely save those quotes for your history, for your records. I'm going to end it with a preview of some margin erosion things that we have in the system. One of those being Autopart Templates. And what I'm going to do is hold a webinar for both of these functionalities in more depth webinar of how to set them up. But if you're not using them, I highly encourage you to use them. Autopart Templates, you can have as many as you need set up here. You can have, one for out-of-town jobs, and if you guys do, overtime labor or regular time labor, you can have as many templates as you need. Whatever, they're basically pre-built templates so that you're not leaving things off and forgetting to at least think about them. So for an example today, I did a template here with a labor line, a design line, and a project management line. So instead of having to go and search for and add a labor line and then search for and add a design line, doing all three of those, it's just going to build it out for me. And then I can either choose to use them or remove them, but at least I'm thinking about them. Freight, another one. I'm going to show you the auto freight feature in eManage, but some people choose to just use a freight auto template part, which is perfectly fine. You just want to be thinking about it in some form or fashion. Okay, you have to be thinking about these things that could just immediately erode your margin. So what I'm going to do is all I did down here is choose Autopart Template, and I selected this one to use. And now when I go Tools, New Option, it's just going to build that template out for me. So all those lines that I need to think about. So you can see it put it all into one, based off of how I set it up, put it all into one phase. And here they are. They're all going to be a quantity of 0. So then I can just quickly come in here and be like, I do need to charge a project management line. And I don't need to charge, maybe I don't need to charge labor, but I need to charge 3 hours. I'm sorry, I don't need to charge design, but I need to charge labor. If I just leave it at 0, when I go over to view quotes, it's going to ask me, hey, there's automatically added parts on here with a quantity of 0. Do you want to delete them before creating a quote? You can say no and leave it on there for a reminder later, or you can say yes and it'll remove that line for you automatically. So I don't even have to right click delete it. You can just leave it and then hit yes here. Okay, and it automatically brings in a blank phase for you as well, so you can add furniture to this or whatever other parts you need to add, or you can right click and delete it if you don't need it. Okay. Also, if you import in using those, you saw, I skipped right over it, but the choose Autopart Templates in the import window, that's the exact same way. So I don't have to pre-build it and then import. I can just go import, choose my file, and tell it to choose this template. It's always going to remember your last chosen. So as an administrator, you can go around and say, you know what, going forward, we're going to use this template for everyone. I want you to think about that. You go around, check everybody's templates on. Every single time they go tools, new option, or try to import something in, it's going to build out that template for you. The other feature, margin erosion saving feature, is the actual freight specific template. So those Autopart templates, auto freight part is totally separate. And basically what it is you're telling the system on the actual vendor record that this vendor does charge me freight. If you have some set freight terms with the manufacturer, you could set those up and you can do it, you can have a ceiling, it could be a minimum charge, those small order fees. You can set all of those up. And again, I'm going to go over that in a separate webinar. But this particular one, I have it set to go 3% on total list at all times for anything that I add from Alamir. And so I'm just going to go in and add a part, and you're going to see what it's going to do here. It's going to grab that part, hit the plus, and on this option level 4 here, you're going to see it's going to add it to this phase, but it's automatically going to add a freight phase underneath that option, own separate freight phase, and calculate it out for you. Now it does look a little bit different, but they don't see that because what we've done is we've set it up to hide. This is just the way that it calculates. So the 3% of list of this 890 is 2670. And what it did was it just said, okay, our cost is 2670. And what I've done is I've actually told it to automatically put a 30% margin, and so it just marked it up. You can make it just go flat across the board if you need to. But anytime that you've got freight terms, automatically set with a vendor, definitely set those freight terms up, and it's just automatically going to add every single time. And as I add, now my quantity of this is going up, actually 5 chairs, it's going to automatically adjust the freight as well. Oh, well, of course it didn't on this one for my perfectly good example. You guys, I promise you it is working. I'm in a test database, so this sometimes my test environment doesn't play along well with me. And we're working on lots of updates right now. But also if you remove or you have a cap, it's automatically going to adjust, accordingly. It works beautifully. Lots of clients, new clients are using that, but some of the older ones, if you are curious about that, definitely attend the webinar on margin erosion, and we'll go into more depth on how to set all of those things up. But if you're antsy to get to it right away, definitely call into support, or you can email me and I can send you some documentation on how to get that set up and work with you individually if you're antsy to set that up. Hope you guys learned a few tricks from this and some best practices. I'm going to open it up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chat them in or unmute yourself and ask away. Leave it open for about 10 minutes or so. Wow, I'm shocked. That's a lot of information. So I know most of you probably have been doing the bill of materials for some time, but hopefully you took some tricks away from there.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Hey.
Scott Wegman, how are you?
Doing good, Scott. How are you?
Quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can show it because you're having an issue with your quote thing, but is there a way in quotes for an option? So obviously our situation, I have various labor options on a particular project. The challenge that we have is that it always totals all the options. So my client is immediately freaked out that I have 4 different labor options when really they're just picking one of those 4.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that I cannot have it total?
We might have to do a custom report for you, but we might want to take a look at your settings. So let me just open something up real quick I'm in a different database, so let's check it out.
Project number 500 was canceled by administrator on Friday, September 13th.
So I'm just going to do multiple options here. While that's loading, I had a question come in. If you uncheck not current in the view BOM tab, will it make your quote automatically reappear in the view quote screen? Uncheck not current in the view BOM tab. No. Yes, if you uncheck it, yes, it'll automatically appear back in the view quote screen if you uncheck not current. If you check not current, then it's automatically going to hide. Another update, just so you guys are aware, we are changing the way that current opportunities is reporting. We're going to remove active and expired quotes because we're going to make current opportunities show all broken down by quotes. So the problem there was if you book something, it automatically moves that project into current backlog. Even if you had an additional quote on that job, it's going to leave anything behind that hasn't been booked. And that will be based off of valid and most likely quotes. And Scott, I'm hesitant to say, like, you might just want to be presenting multiple options, like multiple quotes with the different options on them. But I would just want to double check to see maybe you have option totals on. As that's loading, another question that came in, what's the difference between deliver to and ship to addresses? So deliver to and ship to. That is, ship to is what's going to actually print on the purchase order. So where you're shipping the product. Okay, so that's what's carrying over to the order, the purchase order. Deliver to, it does show up in order entry, and you can have a different address there, and it'll print on the work order. So if your install is for some reason different than your deliver to, that's what you could use that for. So maybe you're shipping it somewhere, delivering it elsewhere, and installing somewhere else. I find that really rare, but I have had some clients use the deliver to just for something different. I've seen clients use deliver to for moving from one building to another building. So maybe the product is getting shipped to your warehouse, but then you're installing the product at a final destination and moving some product from a different. Some people will put something in this deliver to and on their work order notes, hey, pick up product from deliver to address and install at install address. So I've seen people use it differently, but ship to is purchase order, deliver to and install at is what's going to print on your work order. Hope that answers your question, Lexi. I'm wondering, Scott, if optional items totaled. No. Let's just see if what we get here. I'm in a different database, so I should be able to view and show this quote now. I'm getting a same thing from the chat as well. Another person saying you want it to not total the different options. So these are your yeah, I see what you're saying. The multiple options. So I think when people are presenting those, they're usually presenting them in separate quotes. But I can look into that. Let me run that by my team and see what they think about. I mean, it's totaling them separately. And then...
yeah, it just combines them at the end.
Well, these are separate. So I bet you have show... It is going to... Make sure I got that right here. Stacy, the line items sorting differently than what's on the BOM when you invoice, that should have been corrected in one of the most recent updates. So if you might want to check to make sure you don't have a custom quote that a custom invoice that you're using. But I'm going to make note of that, and Stacy, I'll check back in with you, and because that was fixed in a most recent update, unless it's this update that I'm thinking about. But Ravi corrected the invoice to be in the exact same order that's on their quote. I would get why that would be annoying. I have both options here. Because it was showing them individually, the totals. They are the same, but it was showing them individually and not totaled together. They were each 118.
I think it was at the bottom when it does the whole thing.
So past the summary page.
At least for.
So this is option.
Yeah.
This is option 1 at 118, and this is option 2 at 118.
Yeah, and then isn't there something further down?
Mm-mm.
Huh. Yeah. Ours usually you'll have another part where it adds those two together. I'll have to look at it. Yeah,
definitely shoot me an example, like exact quote number, exact project number, and I can take a look to see what you're. Same for IBI. If you guys are seeing the same thing, please let me know. I don't think that either of you are on a custom quote, but I could be wrong, and that could be something that needs to be cleared up on your custom. When mine totals the options at the bottom. I have someone else chatting in saying that when it totals options at the bottom, they just export to Word and delete the line items with the totals. We don't want you to have to do that. If you're doing that every single time, and you're probably not doing it every single time because you have, you're not putting multiple options on every single quote, but what we can do is just get you a custom quote. And if everyone's in agreement and that's what everyone feels, it shouldn't grand total it, then we can just, let's just talk about how we change the base report. Deborah, yeah, what Deborah's talking about though, she exports here to Word and just removes it manually, saves it back as a PDF. Oh, a couple things that I forgot to mention. Hopefully everyone's still on. Couple of things here, these reports, print estimated P&L, print BOM. These are great little reports. If you want to look at at a more of a quick glance instead of looking at the busy bill of materials screen, the view BOM gives you an really nice estimated profit report, broken down cost, sale, profit, GP, all of that. But I also really like the print BOM. If you're not using this, you can uncheck certain things. If I don't want weight, maybe I don't want any of this pricing on it, but you can choose to have list and cost. Maybe I just want to take a look at my Arcadia and not these. You have options there. You can look at all of them. This is a great, really nice, clean, itemized list report, for design checks or whatever you need to do there. Great report there. Give it to your contractors if they need a itemized list without showing them the quote and all the different things that the quote entails. This is just an itemized list of the product. Got a chat coming in. Someone commented that they love that bill of materials report. They use it for sending to their installing dealers so they know what to expect. So yeah, great tool to use there. Our report's really nice and clean. Since this one was more of a back to the basics type training, what we might do another session later on with some more advanced features with pictures and maybe some adding optional items and things like that. If I have any other Technion dealers on the phone other than IBI, I'd love to hear from you. I got a comment coming in from one of our Technion dealers that they would really like to get the Technion CRs on the BOM report, so that print BOM. If that's something that my other Technion dealers would definitely like to see, please let me know. The more that I have people saying that they need the same thing, more leverage I have to get development to kind of do it. So love to hear from you guys. But if you need that right away, Dina, I assume that's you, you know, definitely reach out to support and we can put something together probably. All right, I see people logging off. So if you don't have any further questions, you can go ahead and log off. I do appreciate your time. I hope you guys are finding value in these. And we'll see you for the next session in 2 weeks, same day, same time. We're going to go over order entry and purchase orders. So you will be getting an invite from me on that one. Hope you guys all have a great day. And if you have any further questions, need anything, please reach out to me or support. Happy to help. Thanks, guys.